At 6:30 p.m., I'm going to call the meeting to order. Renee, can we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brewer,
Here.
Mr. McDaniel,
Here.
Ms. McCowan,
Here.
Mr. Jablonski,
Here.
Ms. Byrd,
Here.
Mr. McClure, Mr. Griffith,
Here.
Ms. Kendall,
Here.
Mr. Parker.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Moving to our consent items, starting with item number 1, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of the minutes of the January 11th, 2024 regular Planning Commission meeting. And item number 2, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of SFP-2324-10, consideration of a short form plat submitted by Mark Crittenbrink, Pollard and Whited for Elm Avenue Cottages for approximately 0.31 acres of property located at 463 Elm Avenue. And item number 3, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of PP-2324-14, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by Halbrook Development Group, SMC Consulting Engineers, PC, for Halbrook Addition with a variance in cul-de-sac length for Greensboro Way for 41.57 acres of property generally located south and west of East Rock Creek Road and 24th Avenue Northwest. Does any member of the commission wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Does any member from the audience wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Seeing none, I would take a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 8-0.
Moving to our next items, number 4, 5, and 6 together. Consideration, item number 4, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution number R-2324-75. Shaz Investment Group LLC requests an 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan from low-density residential designation to commercial designation for 25.12 acres and high-density residential designation for 14.82 acres to allow for commercial and residential uses on property generally located near the northeast corner of Indian Hills Road and 48th Avenue Northwest. Item number 5, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-27, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Section 36201 of the Code of the City of Norman so as to remove part of the southwest quarter of Section 34, Township 10 North, Range 3 West of the Indian Meridian, Cleveland County, Oklahoma, from the PUD Planned Unit Development and place the same in the C2 General Commercial District and RM6 Medium Density Apartment District of said city and providing for the severability thereof near the northeast corner of Indian Hills Road and 48th Avenue Northwest. And item number 6, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of PP-2324-9, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by Shaz Development Group, Inc., SMC Consulting Engineers, PC, for Whispering Trails Addition for 39.94 acres of property generally located at the northeast corner of Indian Hills Road and 48th Avenue Northwest. I'll take the staff presentation.
Good evening, Melissa Navarro with the Planning Department. We got this application from Shaz Investment Group, LLC, for a Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan Amendment from low-density designation to commercial designation and high-density residential designation for the property located at the northeast corner of the intersection of West Indian Hills Road and 48th Avenue Northwest. This is the existing Norman 2025 land use map. You can see it is designated as low-density residential. It has some commercial properties to the south and mixed use to the east. This is what the applicant is proposing to divide the property into. The north part is going to be high-density residential, and the south is going to be commercial. The applicant is also applying for rezoning from SPUD, Simple Plan Unit Development, to C2 General Commercial Designation and RM6 Medium Density Apartment District, and consideration This is the existing zoning. You can see there's a PUD on the north, on the east, and on the south, and the commercial property on the corner. And the proposed is going to look like this, RM6 to the north and C2 to the south. This is the existing land use. Most of the properties around this one are vacant lots, but there are some residential to the north and to the south and to the west, mostly for Moore and Oklahoma City area. We have received a protest letter within the notification area that represents 45.8% of protest. This is an aerial of the property. This is an aerial with some perspective. You can see the residential developments to the north. This is West Indian Hills looking west. This is the intersection between West Indian Hills and 48th Avenue Northwest. And this is 48th Avenue Northwest looking north. And this is the preliminary plat that the applicant has presented. And this is the preliminary site plan. The applicant is here, and he's going to go into further detail on this. The property is, as I mentioned before, is currently zone PUD, plan unit development with ordinance number 01011-14 adopted in 2011 that proposed single-family detached residential. The applicant seeks to rezone C2 63% of the lot and then RM6 medium density apartment district for the remaining 37%. The subject property is located on the border of Norman and Moore. Multiple housing developments, as we've seen before, are completed or under construction in this general area. The applicant proposes to add medium-density housing and some commercial space to the area, and the property is currently zoned for single-family residential uses only. Staff forward this request for rezoning from PUD Plan Unit Development Ordinance Number 01011-43 to C2 General Commercial District and RM6 Medium Density Apartment District to the Planning Commission for consideration and recommendations to City Council. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for staff?
I have a question. So there's going to be residential here, but I don't see a park that's planned, and it looks like there's nothing developed, so there aren't parks nearby. Did I miss something?
Okay, this item went to the parks, to the Board of Parks last Friday, I think, or Thursday. And park staff recommended to support the developer's request for a fee in lieu of parkland decision. So basically, this property was part of a neighborhood park master plan, but then the Redlands, which is next door to the east, it contains a public park in the northeast corner. So the board doesn't, we no longer seek to a second smaller park from adjacent developments. And then we also have the Ruby Ground Park, which is 2 miles south to the development.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions by commission for staff?
Just one. The proposed turnpike that's going to follow the Indian Hills Road path, how is that going to affect this development and development south of that?
Well, I don't have a good answer for this one, so I'm going to call for help because I think the applicant might have more details on this one.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we take the applicant presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sean Rieger, for the applicant in this case. I think we have no mouse. Here we go. A little different tonight on this one. So Sean Rieger for the applicant, thank you. I'll get to both of those questions. I actually have slides at the end anticipating you would ask for that, but I didn't put them in the front. So I'll talk about that at the end. But and staff has described this pretty well. We're in the far northwest part of Norman. We had some other slides that show you this, but they're not coming up, so I'm not sure what happened to them. I'll move on to this slide. So we had a couple of slides that show you the broad area and how this is in the far northwest corner of Norman. Just north of this, there are significant residential additions that are blossoming all around this. The north edge of this property, or not of this property, but the north edge of the screen that you see there is Moore. And the west edge of that screen that you see there is Oklahoma City. So we are right at the point of three different cities right here. Our property is outlined in red, as you see. On the left, it was 2025 planned for low-density residential, and then on the right is the PUD. I remember doing this zoning in 2011, and the PUD on the right that you see there was for very small lot, single-family homes. I believe they were roughly 40 feet in width on the lot. So it was a very dense product that was being planned at that time. But what has happened is the turnpike very likely is coming through here. We believe that very strongly now, and we want to get out in front of that, just as Redlands did next to us and others are now starting to do along this corridor. We want to plan for that. So no longer do we think single-family homes want to be right next to a turnpike. So what does want to be next to it? Probably commercial, probably high-density residential, and so that's the effort tonight, is to start planning ahead for that. So let me go on to the next slide here. This was the staff report. This is the site plan in front of you. You see the one dedicated street down the middle of it going east and west, and one little stub coming off the north of it. I don't have a pointer tonight, so I'm sorry I can't show the point to it, but you see it right through the middle there is the gray dedicated street. The north end of that street is RM6, and this is straight zoning RM6. This is not a PUD. So this is what we call straight zoning or district zoning, taken right off your books. So this is the RM6 product right out of your code book. And on the south is C2 right out of your code book. The corner that you see kind of blank there is also zone C2. So we are just mimicking the corner product of C2 for the bottom part under that street. The north part would be RM6. And you can see the street through it. The southern part is just a collection of different commercial buildings and parking lots. We do believe the turnpike will go right through the bottom of this, and if that happens, then we will have to redo the site plan and of course, redo the preliminary plat. I'll show you the turnpike plan in just a moment, Commissioner. Staff did write, this will increase the housing offered with multifamily options and add commercial possibilities, creating a mixed-use sense to the neighborhood while taking advantage of the existing infrastructure. We've talked a lot about the need for housing. We need all types of housing. We need multifamily and single-family, and so this will bring in a multifamily product. Ridgeview at Carrington was just zoned to the south, and also Redlands to the east was also just zoned, and both of those were mixed-use developments that were similar in what we're proposing tonight. This is the preliminary plat. It's about 40 acres. It, again, separates with a street down the middle of it. Commercial is about 25 acres. Multifamily is about 14 acres. There are access locations connecting to the Redlands, and you see that street going right through the middle. That will connect to Redlands on the right. And then you see a little stub street coming off the top of it. That will connect to the neighbor to the north. So, and that's a point in the protest letter. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, that they said we don't connect. We do connect. We've left that connection in there. No negative traffic impacts are anticipated. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat. This is the green space, and we've tried pretty hard to put a good amount of green space down in the commercial areas with buffers and frontages, and then in the middle of the parking lot over on the right side to have a good bit of green space as well. So green space is about 15.9 acres. This is the protest. This came in at about 4 o'clock today. By the way, I think some of our communications to you have been that there was no protest. We just got this at about 4 o'clock today, so please forgive us if we did tell you there weren't any. There wasn't until this afternoon. This is the protest. It's from the neighbor. It is, staff told you it was 45%. It is one letter, one protest. They just so happen to own most of the property around us to the west, to the south, and to the north. And so you see on the upper left, that is one owner that sent one letter on this. So, but the concerns that were expressed in that was he is opposing RM6 next to R1. That was one main theme of the letter. And the second was that he said we didn't have connecting streets any longer to his product on the north. We actually do. And I think that was probably something that earlier in this project, we didn't have a connecting street. We went back and put it in. Staff urged us to do that, and we agreed with that. So probably Mr. McGottam was referencing a prior draft and not aware that we had put that street back in. But let's talk about the residential RM6 to RM1. Before, it was a PUD of 288 lots. Now it's RM6 of 252, a smaller footprint than before, but relatively similar in unit count, in fact, less. And it is certainly common in our town to have RM6 apartments next to single family. I put just one right there on the left that you can see. And this is a new product. This is something that came about in just recent years. On the right, you see it, Tecumseh Road and 12th Avenue Northwest. This is right across the street from Cisco. This is a new apartment complex, I think probably the newest in Norman, certainly one of them. And right next to it, on the northern edge, abutting directly up against each other, is a single-family product. I believe that's Landmark Homes. This is building really nice homes right next to RM6. So this is common, and I could probably put dozens of photos on the screen for you to see where we have RM6 next to single family. Very common. And in fact, in zoning, as we often do, we usually blend down more or less from intense commercial down to something like office, multifamily, and then to single family. It is very common to layer it down from the intensity of something like a turnpike. So that would be very common for us to do. So we think we've addressed that protest in a respectful and honorable manner. I will say too, at one point, we did actually propose a layer of single family around that RM6. But it just didn't look right. It seemed odd, and in fact, staff was not very pleased with it. They asked us to go back to just full RM6 to not have sort of an awkward one layer of single family. And when you think about it, what really is the difference? If we have single family abutting next to RM6 within our site, or single family abutting next to RM6 on the adjacent site, it is no different. It's going to abut at some point. We made it abut at the corner. So that is a look, and you kind of see, start to see the context. We had some larger views that show you these neighborhoods all over to the north. Right abutting us to the north is a neighborhood that's under development right now, and you see the one just west of it. But that's the context, and you can see ours is outlined in red. Redlands is to the right, and the Foxworth Edition is what that neighboring product is called. You see the C2 on the lower corner. And then you see what used to be called J&J, or now Bridgeview. It also has commercial and multifamily right across the street from us, off to the south of Indian Hills. You see Redlands on the right of our site. And you see commercial more or less lining up. It's a little bit more south on Redlands than it is on ours. And it's a little bit hard to see, but that street that goes through our addition connects right into a street that is in Redlands. So, and of course, this will all have sidewalks. So if you have the street, you have sidewalks, and you have the connectability of foot traffic and vehicular traffic as well. Redlands also lines up, you see, with the single family at top, and then if you see the multifamily in Redlands, that more or less lines up with the multifamily in our site. So we've more or less layered them so that they line up very similarly. Let's go a little farther, and I'll show you that is the summary again. Nobody attended pre-development. We got the one protest letter today, and we have parks. Let me show you the parks to address that. I guess it's a little bit small on the lower left. But what is envisioned here, and at Parks Board, this was discussed, and it's in the report for you. Long ago, when we zoned uplands and the developments to the east of this, it was imagined or thought that we would have a long linear park, and you see it at the top of the screen there called Gateway Park and Trails. And this is really intended to be a pretty special park that's going to go across the entirety of the northern edge of Norman and culminate over by I-35 in a park zone, and to be a linear park that can be traveled and traversed, trail and so forth. That's been long planned. I believe you see there, that was 2010. We did the original Whispering Trails in 2011, and so it's always been planned to have this linear park. The way it will work, and the plan is, on our side, if you look at the parks report, it says that our park would be about 1.1 acres. That's a pretty tiny little park, and Parks Department doesn't usually like small little parks because they have to go mow them and maintain them. So they would rather have more regional parks, this being one of those. As Parks Report talks about, though, they need money to buy some of the land to finish out this long linear park. And so they have preferred fee in lieu of, so that they can use the money from this development to complete the purchase of the lands necessary for the Gateway Park, and then that would be a reality on into the future. So that's the parks issue. The Turnpike issue, Commissioner, you can see, now this is speculative. We don't know, and that's part of our problem in planning right now. We don't know for sure, but that's Access Oklahoma, very cartoonish. That's about all we have, but that's what is the only thing out there right now. You can see the Redlands development on the right that was approved by you and City Council really quite easily. I don't think we ran into any opposition on those. And as we said then, if the Turnpike comes through, then basically you chop the front off of these developments, and we go back and revise the preliminary plat and the planning. It really is the same true on this one. We would probably chop off that front square piece and then revise the commercial behind it, so that then we have commercial fronting to the Turnpike and then multifamily behind that. So that is a summary of it all. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time, and I thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for the applicant?
I have one question. Do you know how many of the units would be single bedroom, or are they all family units?
Yeah, I don't, Commissioner. This is just straight zoning, so we don't have a PUD in place that gets down to that level of unit type, so I don't at this time.
Thanks.
I had a question. I know you talked about each of the developments, but can you quickly point out, I think you can tell from the aerial, but what's been developed and what has not been developed and what's under development?
Okay, and I just realized I do have a pointer. I apologize. The keypad on this laptop is allowing me to do this. So, yes, Commissioner. So on this screen, the only thing that has been developed is the pink right down here. This is the PUD of the Glen Ridge addition. This has been approved, basically. This has been approved as Redlands. The Foxworth addition up here, I say has been approved, but probably is an expired preliminary plat. I don't know that for sure. Staff confirms expired preliminary plat, and of course you see the reality up on the upper left. So of the middle sections here that I'm showing you, the only one that is actually done is Glen Ridge right here, the pink.
Could you just speak to a little bit, for benefit of the commission, the difference of including a site plan for a zoning request versus a PUD, since we usually see you for a PUD?
You do, and thank you, Commissioner. It's a difference of, in a PUD, well, first, let's talk about it in preliminary plat context versus the PUD. Preliminary plat, we do have to do a site plan, and the preliminary plat has a site plan with it. That is that. So the preliminary plat does require a preliminary site development plan. That does align with the plat and goes forward with the plat. But zoning, a PUD requires a site plan. Straight district zoning, RM6, C2, does not. So on a PUD, you are locked to the site plan. On straight district zoning, you are not. But the preliminary plat does essentially also have somewhat of the same effect as to the site plan.
Thank you. Any other questions by commission for the applicant? Could you also just tell me a little bit about the buffer in the north, and specifically, is it parking lots that will be backing up to those single-family lots of the neighbors' expired preliminary plat, potentially?
Correct, yes, Commissioner, it is. Really two different areas. Let me use the pointer if I can get it. There we go again. So you see right here is planned to be townhomes. Again, this is zone RM6, so it can be basically anything from apartment complex under intensity down from that. But this is currently zoned as basically townhomes, sort of a duplex product. And then this is parking lot. So the parking lot is around the perimeter of these multifamilies, and then the interior would be clubhouse, ball courts, pickleball, things like that, that would be in the interior of within this multifamily. So yes, parking lot and green space on the edge of it.
About how much do you know is the width of that green space buffer before it gets to the backyard?
I don't have a dimension. Chris, do you remember your dimension? Yeah, typically we do 10 feet because parking lots, when you're on the frontage of a dedicated street, you have to have 10 feet landscape zone. And so usually that's what we show around those perimeters.
Thank you. And just one other question. Do you have a percentage of green space if, in the event where the turnpike were to take the portion of land that could happen based on what you can see now, what your remaining green space would be from what you have planned?
I don't think we ran that calculation, Chris, so I don't have that, Commissioner, but I think if you just visually look, if the turnpike comes in and essentially cuts off this southern part right here, it's mostly going to cut off a lot of impervious, so I don't think it would change significantly. If the percentage actually probably goes to more green than it does hardscape.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I'd move to audience comments. Seeing none, I'd move to Planning Commission discussion. I just wanted to thank the staff for putting in the description. I believe that was our planner, Laura Hoggett, that had done that. The description of the fee in lieu, I found that very beneficial. So very much appreciated that and wanted to thank you for including that.
I'll give some comments. I think there's a lot to like in this project. I like that they blended the trees into the parking areas. That's going to help with heat in the long run. Also helps with livability, being close to homes. You know, I do like the higher density. I think that's great. We need higher density if we're going to do infill development. We know that we need more houses. You know, one thing that I found disappointing was that the parks approved fee in lieu of a park. You know, I measured the park from my house in our neighborhood, and it's 0.3 of a mile. Any more than that, and, you know, it'd be hard for my kids to go to it. What are kids going to do here? Get in the car and drive to the regional park? I mean, you know, so I really think that the Parks Board should have thought more carefully about this, but overall, I think it's a nice project.
Thank you. Any other Planning Commission discussion? Seeing none, I would take a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 8-0.
Okay, moving to our next items, number 7, 8, and 9. Item number 7, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution number R-2324-104, a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan so as to remove part of the southeast corridor of Section 19, Township 9 North, Range 2 west of the Indian Meridian, Cleveland County, Oklahoma, from the low-density residential designation and place the same in the office designation for 1720 North Porter Avenue. Item number 8, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-38, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Section 36- 36-201 of the Code of the City of Norman so as to remove the southeast quarter of Section 19, Township 9 North, Range 2 West of the Indian Meridian to Norman, Cleveland County, Oklahoma from the SPUD Simple Planned Unit Development and place the same in the SPUD Simple Planned Unit Development District and providing for the severability thereof, 1720 North Porter Avenue. And item number 9, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of PP-2324-13, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by Anthony Blatt on behalf of the owner for VCN Development, a simple planned unit development, 1720 North Porter Avenue. The staff presentation.
All right, I won't reread everything I'm not Erica just read, but I'm Laura Hoggett, obviously with the planning department. All right, so here we have the existing 2025 designations. It is currently low density residential. I think it was 2022 when this was changed from institutional to low density residential. And they are requesting to change this to office for 2 office buildings. One is a known medical use, but they're still looking for the other building. So the current SPUD for this property allows for single-family residential, and this would allow for the office development. It is currently vacant. The Masonic Lodge is the lot just to the south, surrounded by duplexes and single-family. So here's an aerial showing the vacant parcel. This is just a shot of the intersection with Sandpiper and Porter. And then showing the vacant lot where all the trees are lining. The SPUD calls for the trees on the south side to remain, so here's kind of a shot of those. The intersection looking south. And then just another shot of the property. Here's the preliminary plat and the proposed site plan, where you can see the 2 buildings proposed and then parking surrounding it with detention on the west side. So staff forwards. Resolution 2324-104, Ordinance 2324-38, and preliminary plat 2324-13 for your consideration. The applicant is here to answer questions and staff's available as well.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for staff?
The photo, looking into the parking lot, is that going to be a shared entry? That one right there? So basically, the entry to the 2 buildings will be at that light?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I take the applicant presentation.
Yes, just use the arrows.
Good evening, Commissioners. Anthony Blatt on behalf of the owner. First, I'd like to express how much I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you this evening. I know that this has been a little bit of a different scenario in the fact that the intent of this development and the intent of why we're here today is I have an owner who is wishing to purchase the property. The owner is wanting to put a medical facility on the property, and this current zoning does not allow for that. The original land use plan did allow for institutional, but whenever the previous SPUD was done, it was reverted to residential. What we're wanting to do is take it back and allow a two commercial buildings to be placed on this site. The owner has not purchased the property yet, so we have produced a plan that shows the 22,000 square foot office space that is on the east and a 10,000 square foot office space that has not yet been determined who would own it. But the footprint as shown is just a rectangle because the owner has not hired us yet to design the buildings. So for that reason, we realize that once the building is designed, we will be allowing staff to see it again so that they can comment on any impact that we have if we create additional permeable area around the buildings. The hope is that we would be able to have staff see all of the, they had comments about the engineering staff had comments relative to the the drainage calculations prior to us submitting. The drainage calculations were not turned in on time. The intent was that we would have those drainage calculations reviewed by city staff before this meeting today. Those drainage calculations and the comments that were provided by staff have been addressed, but they were after the submission deadline. So the intent is that we would be able to go to go from planning commission to council and have the all comments addressed on those drainage calculations so that the owner could purchase the property and then go forward with the design of the buildings. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for the applicant?
I have one. The buildings, will they be single-story or two-story?
Single story.
Okay. Is there any consideration of the design of the buildings? Will they be residential in appearance or just square blocks?
Well, they'll be commercial in appearance. They won't be residential type buildings. They would be more of a commercial building.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
More as a notice on your site design, you have called out the, where you want to keep the trees on the south border. I know in the meeting that you had with neighbors, they were concerned about an ash tree around the detention pond, and it is not on the site plan. Just was curious as to why, if there are different plans than what was indicated in the pre-development meeting.
No, the ash plan is going to remain. I realize that we need to show it on either the updated preliminary plat or the final site development plan, but the ash tree will remain, and we're happy to amend our SPUD document to include that.
That'd be great. Thanks.
I had a question. How did you determine your, not necessarily parking ratio, but number of parking spots you needed as it relates to the size of the building and the site?
The owner, the future landowner, once he purchases the property, wants to make sure that he's created enough parking for staff and for the tenants, the public who will come to the facility. I realize that we exceed the current parking ordinance, and I know that if we need to make adjustments to that, we would be happy to do so, but at the time, we were trying to maximize parking for the behalf of the owner.
Okay, yeah, without getting in, I mean, I can't get into calculating, it just feels like there's a lot of parking on this site, and so I want to make sure that that is, really dig into that and determine what actual need is.
Well, and once we have the opportunity to design the building and see what the actual square footage is, we are happy to present a parking plan that meets the ordinance. We have no problem adjusting our parking so that we're in compliance with what the city is expecting to see.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Do you intend on getting someone to lease the other one before designing it and building it, or are you planning on leaving some of the land grass until you know what is going to be in that second building?
That we would not be building the additional parking or that building until it is a known. My understanding from the owner, and although he hasn't, I mean, we haven't gone into any kind of planning, but we would not be building a speculative building and leaving it vacant.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, and so how many of the parking spots that we see are actually what you guys are anticipating needing for the one building you know you're going to build, the staff and any clients?
So right now, it's 1/3, 2/3, roughly 22,000 square feet and 10,000 square feet. We anticipated that we would have 1/3, 2/3 on the parking as well, so about 2/3 of the current parking. But again, we haven't been hired to actually lay the building out, and couldn't do so until the owner has.
You don't have an idea of how many parking spots they feel they will need?
I would have to go and look and see what I would have to look at that. I don't want to give an answer and then give you something that is incorrect. But we would definitely work with staff to make sure that the parking is in compliance with city ordinance.
Well, question relative to the parking, does the owner have an idea in mind about how many suites will be available for rent in the big building?
It's a single use. It's one single-use medical facility.
Okay. Thank you.
It won't be split into,
So it won't be doctor's offices, it will be
yes,
like a emergency medical center or something?
outpatient, business occupancy medical clinic.
Can you speak to some of the intent of lighting for this? Your PUD does clarify it directs to commercial lighting ordinances. I went to the pre-development meeting. Thank you very much for arriving there and met you there. It was a very nice experience. In that effect, there could be up to, from what I understood from our planner, Laura Hoggett, up to 20 feet of height lights within 20, if it's within 25 feet of residential. So that is still within a sight line of a neighboring backyard residential use. And you were very kind to say you will have cutoff lumens, no overbleed, but still in the visual lighting that you would still see the light, whether the light actually made it onto their perimeter or not. Anything that you could speak to for that visual vista of what those backyards will see?
So we have a border, a 20-foot border, and then also we have the islands, and the parking lot lights would be in the islands. We said 20 feet in that meeting just because we wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to back ourselves into something that we wouldn't be able to accomplish. Ultimately, we want to be good stewards and good neighbors to these adjacent homeowners. We're willing to work to come up with something and provide sightline diagrams to show how those lights are going to be. If ultimately, for the success of the project, a 15-foot pole is what would be more preferred, and we could get it to spread, and it's more about uniform light distribution rather than hotspots, so that you have the perception of safety as you're walking across the parking lot, not just providing code required to the public way, but also have a very safe parking lot as well. So we would be willing to work with staff and the adjacent property owners to make sure that the lights that we provide are appropriate, and if we need to come back off of 20 feet in order to do so, we would be willing to consider that.
Thank you. And similarly, I know Commissioner McCowan, she had brought up too about the site plan. Also in your item number 4 from your PUD narrative, I did see that you had specifically called out preserving those trees that are adjacent to the south.
Correct.
And similarly, I would like to see that PUD narrative include that same ash tree in question.
That is on us. It should have been there as the next paragraph, and we will include that.
Any other questions for the applicant? I would move to public comment if there is any. Seeing none, I would move to Planning Commission discussion.
I had a question for staff, or a little out of order there, but there's reference to what city ordinance is for, or requirements are for parking. What are the requirements for parking on a site of this nature? Okay, that's what I assumed.
We recently changed the parking requirements from requirements to recommendations in the commercial, office, retail. The residential still has the requirements, but these are simply recommendations at this point.
And clarifying, there is no parking maximum limits in the city of Norman at this time.
Correct.
Really my comment is the development itself doesn't concern me. actually like that it's a single user. There's a lot to be desired about that they really going to hone in on what they need. At the same time, this leaves a little bit open as far as what could actually make it into the final PUD and what could be built out. And so, again, as a development, I'm fine with it. I'd just like to see some more definition, and maybe that's something that would be a recommendation. I'm trying to think of what that recommendation might sound like, but just more definition between now and if when it goes to council as to what specific parking need is written into the PUD itself. So.
Maybe I'll say some comments. When I looked at this, I saw, an enormous amount of concrete. I think it says 75% impervious, which seems high. In my notes, I asked, myself about the stormwater runoff, but we don't have an answer today, which is unfortunate. If I'm going to contrast this with the previous presentation, with the previous one, and it was not a PUD, so they're not locked into it, but they had parking lots that had trees interspersed. I'm thinking, 50 years out about the heat that this kind of parking lot's going to generate. And on that note, around the edge, where it I think having, commercial and office space next to residential is good, but at the same time, I think you need a buffer, and I don't see any trees that buffer between these two on the north and the west.
Just as a point of order, is there a question for the applicant?
This is a comment for
Thank
the
you.
Planning Commission.
I'll ask a question just because it felt like there was a response. Is there something that we're missing in there?
One of the other comments that came about from the meeting that we had with the adjacent property owners is we plan to put a 6-foot site-proof fence on the north and the west side, and inboard of that, we plan to put a landscape buffer so that the entire 20-foot border on both sides is going to be landscaped. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other planning commission discussion? I did want to address that we didn't have the drainage calculations. I think in general, I have spoken very favorably of not holding people's projects up and being very mindful of holding costs and what that can actually mean. And to that, it is not uncommon to see a contract that has a zoning approval or lot split approval or similar approval as a contingency for a purchase agreement. It sounds like there is something to that effect in play for this transaction. That said, I also know that our staff has a high amount of burden to get these things turned around to us so that we have complete items. So, for example, it sounds like Commissioner Jablonski had some questions about some of the drainage and stormwater that he wasn't able to get addressed in advance for this meeting. So being mindful that we don't frequently get a recommendation for a postponement for staff for those items, but that it is in part for consideration that staff has enough time to address those items and review those in advance so that we can also make informed decisions. I also don't want to, Mr. Blatt has been very pleasant, very accommodating with the neighbors. That is something I speak of positively of other applicants. Mr. Landis was also there and he was very pleasant. He remembered the neighbors that came to the pre-development meeting from another project. They worked together. These are the type of things I'd see, but I do see concern about setting precedent for incomplete applications, maybe not just for this project, but for our comprehensive goal. We have had some examples of easements and some agreements that were in the works and hadn't quite been done, but I cannot recall a time we've had an incomplete, at least in my recollection, an incomplete application that we weren't able to have a stormwater drainage report. So just being thoughtful of that precedent and seeing if there's any other planning commission discussion for that or to that effect for this project specifically.
Let me ask staff a little bit. Before they apply for their overall building permit, that's got to be completed and approved, correct? So if it does not conform to what the standards are, it will not be approved? Okay, thank you.
So if there's, in the planning commission discussion, when we've had items that had a nature, Noun Hotel was an easy one to call back to that I can remember clearly from time on here. We had a parking agreement with a church next door that was not yet in place. It was being worked out, the agreement was not signed. And if I cannot recall the exact motion, but I know in our discussion, we voted to approve at Planning Commission that item contingent on it being in place before City Council. So if that would be something that if there was a motion to approve, that would be included, that such engineering report be reviewed by staff and also receive the recommendation for approval for City Council. And then similarly, those items for the tree too could also be potentially included in a recommendation for allowing the item to continue forward to City Council. Or similarly, there's also a postponement potential motion that could also be made for commissioners to consider.
When I look at this, I see that they've tried to hurry through this process, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But as long as that the final product that's heading to council is correct, I don't see any reason why we need to place any type of restrictions on it. That's just my thought. If the thought is staff's going to make sure that that the stormwater plan is in place and conforms, I don't think that's not going to bother me at all. And just make sure you get the tree put on there because I'm sure council will be asking for it, so.
Any other planning commission discussion?
I'm still concerned by the number of parking spots, particularly because we don't know what's going to be in the second building. And I just wish on the preliminary there was some green space where a bunch of those parking spaces are on that top left, since we don't know. I mean, I know he did answer my question that it's gonna remain, dirt and grass until they do build something. I just feel like approving this means that they could build this.
Any additional discussion? If there's no additional discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
I think we should, personally, I think we should make a motion with recommendations, is my opinion here, so. It's not approve as is.
Does the commissioner wish to change the motion?
I do not wish to change my motion.
Okay, I would take a second
I'll second it.
and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted. Motion carried 5-3.
Moving to our next item, items number, unless we feel differently, we could read item number 10 and 11 together. No, separately, just kidding, just 10. Item number 10, Full acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-39, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Section 36-514 R1 Single Family Dwelling District, 36515 R1A Single Family Attached Dwelling District, 36-516 R2 Two Family Dwelling District, 36-519 RM6 Medium Density Apartment District, 36-520 R3 Multifamily Dwelling District, and Section 36-521 RO Residential Office District of Article 36-V of Chapter 36 zoning to remove the building coverage maximum and providing for the severability thereof. We'll take the staff presentation.
All right, so we have a request to amend our zoning ordinance to remove the residential building coverage maximum. So just a little background, the current requirement is for building coverage to have a maximum of 40% of the lot area, and that's all structures on the lot. And then the overall lot coverage, so impervious coverage, is capped at 65%, which includes buildings, pavement, pools, pretty much anything that's on the property. And for some background, so we have had a lot of, well, we've had 22 applications for variances at Board of Adjustment. You can see 15 passed, 4 failed, 3 withdrew. So our board asked us at one point why we have the building coverage maximum if ultimately there's the 65% coverage. And they just felt like they were seeing this a lot when, what's the difference? So we were asked to look into it. Some history, in 1996, it was the building coverage for R1 and R1A, which is single family attached, was capped at 35%. Then in 96, they changed it to 40%. And then in 07, 08, they capped impervious coverage at 65. So that was the first time we had the overall impervious coverage percentage. So starting last year, we had the Strong Towns Community Action Lab, and we're asked to look into an accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which is our next item. But it came up that a lot of the core area lots that are already existing are kind of small. They don't meet the current like R1 standard of 6,000 square feet. So adding an ADU would push people over the 40%. So we are proposing to just remove that 40% building coverage and stick with just the 65% impervious for the listed zoning districts. I won't read all of them. That's just kind of a summary. I've already said all of that. So that sums it up. We would keep the 65% impervious and take away the 40% building coverage. Any questions?
Any questions by commission for staff? Seeing none, I would move, well, you were the applicant, so we did have a audience comment. We could have Mr. Richard McCowan come up, please. And don't forget to say your name and your address, and I will give you 3 minutes to speak. And if you would like a 30-second warning before your time is up, please let me know.
Love 30-second warning. Hi, thank you. Richard McCowan, 4409 Cannon Drive. I'm here in the capacity of as the chairperson of the Housing Subcommittee that's trying to update our comprehensive land use plan. As many of you know, this AIM Norman process has been well underway. We've had one meeting of the Housing Subcommittee, and as we've gotten survey information back from the listening sessions, it's really become apparent that we have a tremendous shortage of reasonable priced, affordable housing. I've known this for a long time. I've accidentally ended up kind of being the small house guy. Talk about tiny homes, that's not what these are. These are real, actual houses built to code, sitting on the ground, connected to plumbing, all of that. I'm 100% in support of this. This is so important. We've got to build 23,000 new housing units in Norman over the next 23 years. And this is one way that we can make headway toward that goal. The other thing that really is important about the accessory dwelling unit idea, and I got invited to participate in an affordable housing forum held in this chamber 18 months ago or so, and it dawned on me in preparing for that almost everyone I know in the business that I'm in is second and sometimes third generation. The barrier to entry to get into the housing business or the real estate development business is really high. And if you weren't born into it, it's really difficult. And when you look at young people who are coming out of school, whether they've studied architecture or placemaking, and the opportunity for them to have a way in, it's really hard. There's very few opportunities. The building industry used to have lots of folks in the firefighting industry or firefighters that also had a home building practice on the side. The amount of developers who go out and put in neighborhoods and then sell lots to the small home builder that's firefighter or somebody who doesn't build lots and lots of houses, that industry's gone. There isn't anybody out there putting new neighborhoods on the ground, inviting people to come in. The barrier to entry is closed in so many different ways. This ordinance gives us an incredible
30 seconds
opportunity
remaining.
to get ahead of those problems, to create opportunity for all kinds of entrepreneurs, young and old, new second, third career at retirement age. And if we pass this, we're going to be about 45 days ahead of Oklahoma City. And I love that, and I love Oklahoma City, but I love that I live in a research town, forward thinking. So please support this, pass this. Please vote for it unanimously.
Thank you
and
very
send a message
much.
to council.
Thank you very much. Is there any other audience comments? Seeing none, I would move to Planning Commission discussion.
We've talked about this stuff for years, and I'm glad to finally see some movement on it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to reserve my comments for the next item because that's really the ADU ordinance, but these are tandem, so they go together.
And I know we talk a lot about stormwater and impervious area, but remembering that this actually won't, this small change, much like changing parking requirement to recommendation, this change does not actually change impervious area. It just lets more of that impervious area be a building, should the person building choose to. And we have good examples of garage apartments where you could still put cars, and instead of it just being parking, you can put housing above it now. And that's part of our historic neighborhoods. We have these in Core Norman. It's a great way to have multi-generational family income generating opportunities, a lot of ways to make homes more affordable for people, for their primary residence, or for family members that live nearby. So I am in support of this item.
I will make one brief comment. This was included in the staff report, and the last line here talks about it. But the issue has been, if we were to pass an ADU ordinance, that on most lots, it would not have been possible due to the building coverage limit being 40% to add an ADU to that lot. And so you kind of need, when I say they're tandem items, they're necessary tandem items to allow an ADU ordinance to actually work. In other cities, ADU ordinance has been passed without corrections like this to other ordinances, and what they found is, 4 or 5 years in, they've been wondering, why hasn't anything been built? It's because there's other ordinances that are holding that back. And I also want to commend staff for taking the time to research that, to figure out what the impediments would be if you pass an ordinance with other ordinance language in our code. And so, just a little more context that, again, was in the staff report, but just wanted to make sure that was understood.
Thank you. Any other commission comments? Seeing none, I would move to a motion
I move to approve.
Second?
and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 8-0.
Moving to item number 11, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-40, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Chapter 36 zoning, Sections 36-101 definitions, 36-511 A1 General Agricultural District, 36-512 A2 Rural Agricultural District, 36-513 RE Residential Estate Dwelling District, 36-514 R1 Single Family Dwelling District, and 36-570 Board of Adjustment in order to define and create uses for accessory dwelling units and other zoning ordinance amendments for the purposes of compatibility therewith and providing for the severability thereof. Staff presentation, please.
Hello. So I think you guys all have a printed version of the newest version of this. And I think we uploaded a new version on our website too. Anyway, okay, so we are requesting to allow accessory dwelling units in A1, A2, RE, R1, and R1A. There is no R1A language in the ordinance because they have the uses from R1, so it would be duplicative. So we are requesting for R1 and R1A to have a 650 square foot maximum for the ADU. A1, A2, and RE already had an allowance for a guest house, and we didn't want to add an extra limit that wasn't already there for those people to be able to use their guest house that could already be existing as their ADU. Okay, so just a few general guidelines about ADUs. The height cannot exceed the principal dwelling unit. This is something that we already have in our accessory building codes, that they can't be taller than the main house. So that would be one thing. If you do have a one-story house, you can't have a two-story garage apartment, but you could have a garage apartment that's just one story that would be more accessible anyway. There's still a 2-unit maximum per lot in R1 and R1A. We did not include R2, RM2, RM6, and R3 for the ADUs because they already allow more units. So you've already got the density built in there. And then mobile homes are not permitted to be used as an ADU in any of our districts. So that sums it up. We tried to do the Strong Towns approach of the next smallest step, so we think we did this in a hopefully easy way. What? And we made 2 small steps.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for staff? I have one for you. So it came up in one of our recent planning meetings or commission meetings when we discussed if an ADU was it necessary to be detached? And I'm just going to clarify that in this ordinance, it is not necessary for the ADU to be detached. And I point that out because an attached ADU could be more cost-effective for someone to include, which is not necessarily to say taking every house and making it a duplex, but if you already have an existing roof, you have existing electrical, sometimes adding a wall and adding a kitchen to, maybe break some of your house apart can make more sense. I've seen some newer houses kind of developed in that way. So just as a point of clarification that an attached ADU is permitted within this ordinance as well.
Which could be better for aging in place, kind of having your grandma or whoever live with you too. So.
Yes.
Yeah, an attached ADU is oftentimes called a lockout unit, and it's basically, you think of it as a fully functional room in a house that has everything you need but can be locked out as its own unit, and it's very, very efficient, and I think aging in place is probably the best use for that. So.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we do have an audience comment for this item. If Mr. Daniel Zavala Paramo is available. And just a reminder, if you will say your name and address when you come up to the microphone, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to speak. If you'd like a 30-second warning, let me know. Otherwise, okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Zavala Parmo. I live at 609 Nebraska Street. And I'd like to comment on this ADU. Honorable members of the Planning Committee, my name is Daniel Zavala. I'm a student, and I serve as the Director of Policy for Students for Local Action, or SLA. You may be familiar with my colleague and Director of SLA, Anna Heislop. Although she wishes she could attend tonight's meeting, unfortunately she was unable to, but she sends her warm wishes. SLA is the University of Oklahoma's first and only student-led climate advocacy group. We believe that the climate emergency requires action at every level of government to meet our commitments to the Paris Climate Accord. Our organization represents the shared concerns of our student membership for the health of our planet. Furthermore, as a student organization with many who rent near OU, the topic of ADUs for Norman's housing market is particularly important. Given the housing crisis we are experiencing, ADUs are a great way to increase supply of housing without the hurdle of acquiring new property, installing city infrastructure, etc. They also tend to be much cheaper to rent, on average 58% below market price per the University of California, Berkeley. This is good for students, more options, lower prices, while homeowners receive an additional stream of income. ADUs are also good for the climate. An efficient use of existing land to build housing increases density and in turn reduces sprawl. Per the UN's latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, reducing urban sprawl is one of the most effective and cost-efficient ways to limit emissions. For these reasons, I am proud to announce that our student members have unanimously voted to endorse ADUs in Norman, and I urge you all to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. You only used half the time you needed. Are there any other audience comments for this item? Seeing none, I would move to Planning Commission discussion. If there are any other comments, looking right down at you.
Yeah, no, I said I was going to reserve my comments for this. I just briefly, this has been in a discussion for years in Norman. Been happy to see the different the planning and developments that we've been able to approve up here, or recommend up here, I should say, that have come through as part of developments that have occurred in all parts of the city, and I wanted to acknowledge the discussion that's been having for years, but also that this, I've been the chairperson for the Strong Towns Leadership Committee that's for the Strong Towns Community Action Lab, and about 10 months ago, we had 5 recommendations that we brought to council for discussion at their council retreat. One of them was to develop an ADU ordinance, and that was our top priority. And we were thankful to see that also became a top priority of staff to work with both Strong Town staff, but work with council to expedite that process, but also be very thoughtful about it. One of the council members who's instrumental in that was Councilmember Peacock. He took that through his Business Community Affairs Committee. There was a lot of discussion there, a lot of discussion that went into changes in the ordinance that were beyond what was proposed at that meeting. And so, again, and he's not the only one, multiple council members have been involved in this discussion to really round this out. And really appreciated Richard McCowan's comments and the gentleman who just spoke. Both great comments. I think that this does, to Richard's point, this does allow a unique opportunity for homeowners to reinvest in themselves while also providing affordable housing solution. And that's a rare combination that you can do with a measure like this. And we'll add more housing units to our city, which is necessary. And I also think it's going to make our city more interesting. And that's kind of a funny way to put it, but like the more individuals you have living in more dense areas, the better walkability is. The more demand there is for walkability, And ultimately, that creates more demand for interesting businesses and types of development that we'll see. So this is, I'd say, a large step, but also a small step of many that we need to be taking and moving towards. And that, and I really appreciated the approach that the staff took with this being the smallest next step by taking our existing ordinance and making revisions, because that's the way to do it as opposed to trying to recreate the wheel. So I'm really excited about this, and I heard a yes from Richard over there after the first one, so I'm excited to hear him yell after this one. So thank you to staff. That's probably the biggest thing here.
Any other planning commission discussion? I think Commissioner Brewer pretty much summed up a lot of what I had to say too. I also wanted to thank council. There were multiple council members that I know that pushed this along. I'd been following along on the YouTube with the Business and Community Affairs and had been seeing this. And again, thank you to staff who actually spent that time to put that together, that this is extra work that they do on top to help meet these requests that we have and participate in these meetings. So thank you to the people that it actually took to get here. It's easy for us to say yes or no, vote on something, but it takes a lot of work to get things here. So thank you to those people. I also just wanted to mention, we've talked about this on several of our PUDs and new additions that have come through. We're seeing some of our developers starting to put ADUs within their covenants, conditions, and restrictions. We recently had a speaker come to Norman and talk about affordability of housing. Until such a time that outlawing ADUs would become illegal, it is still up to individual developments to put those covenants, conditions, and restrictions in place. So we have been favorable to seeing ADUs come through within those covenants, conditions, and restrictions and in these PUDs. We probably have several that were already passed before that was considered that might be looking to make some revisions in the future, and to remember that they to come up to the same code that we might now be passing. But yeah, and also if there were areas that a developer did not want this as of now, that could still happen within that PUD ordinance and within those covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So gives options. This is just another option that developers and owners can have, and very excited about it. If there's no other commission discussion, I would take a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Second. We're all excited.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 8-0.
Make sure to tell Oklahoma City that the next time you're up there, please. Moving on to our next items, number 12 and 13. Item number 12, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-35, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending section 36-201 of the Code of the City of Norman so as to remove the part of the east half of the section 14, Township 9 North, Range 3 West of the Indian Meridian to Norman, Cleveland County, Oklahoma, from the PUD Planned Unit Development District, and place the same in PUD Planned Unit Development District, and providing for the severability thereof, generally located east of I-35 between Corporate Center Drive and Rock Creek Road. And item number 3, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of PP-2324-12, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by University North Park LLC for University North Park Entertainment District, a planned unit development for approximately 90 acres of property generally located on the east side of I-35 between Corporate Center Drive and Rock Creek Road. The applicant has requested a continuance to April 11th, 2024. And it's a point of order that we do not have to take a vote on that to approve the continuance. Is that correct?
No, you do.
We do? We do approve the continuance? Thank you. Can you, okay, great.
I move to approve the continuance to the April meeting.
April 11th, 2024.
April 11th, 2024.
Thank you. And a vote?
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion to continue to April Passed 8-0.
Moving to our next items 14, 15, and 16 together. Item number 14, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution number R-2324-76, a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending the Norman 20 transportation plan so as to remove part of the southwest quarter of Section 8, Township 8 North, Range 2 West from the Indian Meridian, Cleveland County, Oklahoma, from the industrial designation and place the same in the mixed-use designation and change approximately 11.5 acres from future urban service area to current urban service area, southeast corner of Highway 9 and Jenkins Avenue. Item number 15, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-28, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Section 36-201 of the Code of the City of Norman so as to remove the part of the southwest quarter of Section 8, Township 8 North, Range 2 West of the Indian Meridian to Norman, Cleveland County, Oklahoma, from the I-1 Light Industrial District and place the same in the PUD Planned Unit Development District and providing for the severability thereof, southeast corner of Highway 9 and Jenkins Avenue. And item number 16, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of PP-2324-10, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by Highway 9 Jenkins M&J Investments LLC, Crafton Toll for Sooner Village, a planned unit development for 56.54 acres of property generally located at the southeast corner of Highway 9 and Jenkins Avenue. The applicant has requested a postponement to the March 14th, 2024 meeting, which also would need a vote. So if we could, unless there's any other, we wouldn't have discussion for a postponement, but if there was a motion to postpone to March 14th of the 2024 meeting.
I move to postpone to the
March 14th.
March 14th, 2025 meeting.
2024.
Oh, sorry, 2024.
That's a long postponement. I second the 2024.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion to postpone to March 14th carried 8-0.
Moving to miscellaneous discussion, does staff have any information for the commission?
Me again. Okay. About our AIM community neighborhood workshops that are coming up next week. So we have our first one Monday the 12th at Roosevelt Elementary, Tuesday the 13th at Jefferson Elementary, Thursday the 5th. Did I just say Tuesday the 15th?
Tuesday the 13th, yep.
Yep. Then we have Thursday the 15th at Lakeview, and these are all 6:30 to 8:30. Come and go as you please. And you can find that information at aimnorman.com. We will be doing 3 more of these in March, the second week of March. So stay tuned for those. I'm trying to think what else. Also at aimnorman.com is the monthly polling question, and this month's hot topic is transportation. The steering committee will also be meeting on Valentine's Day, February 14th, next Wednesday, at the Adult Wellness and Education Center at 6 p.m. So if you'd like to come, we'd love to see you there. Anything else? Okay.
Any commissioner comments to make?
Yeah, I have a quick question for the staff. We were talking about this before the start of the meeting. Is there a way for us to be able to change the start time of the meeting? Or is that locked? To earlier, just to be clear, to earlier, not later.
Yes, that question was transmitted to me before. I'm not exactly certain of the process. I don't believe that your meeting times are set by code or anything, so I will do some research into what the process would be and get back in touch with you all about those options.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other miscellaneous discussion by commission? Any other miscellaneous discussion from audience? There's nothing else to come before the commission. I declare the meeting adjourned.
Yes. Hopefully I did